Hi, I'm Ali Words, and this is Last Unrifled Yaw. Last Unrifled Yaw is a podcast where we have conversations about video art, experimental music, avant-garde literature, performance art, and the occult. If you or someone you know would like to be on Last Unrifled Yaw, please get in touch. Dusty Santamaria is a singer-songwriter blending chaos magic with rock and roll. We also talk about the cut-up method, paratheatre, and poetry. Hey everyone, today we have Dusty Santamaria. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, Dusty?
Yeah, sure. I'm a performing songwriter, painter, poet, and kind of all around creative individual. I live in New Orleans. I am also an itinerant wanderer. I tour. I do these do-it-yourself tours to the West Coast annually, and currently I'm in Astoria, Oregon, which is where the Pacific Ocean meets the Columbia River in a very there's a definite vibe here, like definite communication with water spirits and trees, and I feel very happy to be here on this podcast and in this geographical locale currently.
Yeah, sounds like a great
It's
place. Just for the
it's
vibes, at
fascinating,
least.
yeah. It's fascinating. I'm trying to get I mean, I only have a sense of it, Like you really don't really understand the power of place until you've been enveloped there for a long time. But there's a definite energy here that is like undeniable to me currently.
Hmm. Yeah, and I guess you can't really understand the power of a place that you've been in for a long time
That's
until you leave
that's
it.
also true. Yeah, yeah. New Orleans. I mean, New Orleans is there's no secret, about how charged that place is for many reasons. Many reasons. I mean, the history is well documented, but just speaking as a pure kind of like animalistic impression, there's a real it changes. Place changes identity and personality, no doubt. And music, like geographically, like I don't know. When I moved to New Orleans from the California desert, I couldn't play the guitar in the same way that I did. It was
What
well,
do you mean?
when I lived in Southern California, the way that I played my songs came out as kind of like a jagged and kind of like aggressive, like an assault almost, because I felt like the music that I was making was pressing against kind of like a hypnotized and mundane landscape, like in performance. And when I moved to New Orleans, it wasn't like that at all. It turned into more a watery and kind of sultry and like seductive way of playing, because just the it just felt like a different place, and the music wouldn't come out the same way.
I remember Salvador Dali saying something about where you grow up would heavily influence your painting style, and that he credited a lot of the way his paintings look with growing up in
Mm.
Spain, specifically the landscapes, and then it kind of like infected his consciousness for the rest of his
Yeah,
life.
I concur. Yeah, I think the power of place is huge. I've been rather obsessed with it lately because I've been traveling so much, and I feel like a different person from place to place. And not all of that is geography. There's other circumstances tied into it as well. But I think geography is the one that I've been paying most attention to, because it's kind of just like, we're in constant communication with everything around us, right? And if spirit inhabits everything, then it's kind of like subtly communicating to us through everything. And I think that just yeah, just being town to town, day to day, and trying to, like, I try my best to kind of get a sense of every place that I go, at least like at least as it like makes sense to me in the context of my life as a touring musician. Um, and and I just feel, yeah, I feel like I'm treating cities like really beautiful one night stands. I hear that though
That's
about what
cool.
Dolly says. I grew up. I'm the son of produce peddlers, and we did some kind of my dad and my grandfather had a like a traveling produce truck business, and I would go with them a lot as a young child, and I would paint the signs. And I remember they encouraged me. They're like, you don't really need skill. Just make it look as like interesting. Just make it pop. Make it get people's attention. And I think that really like left it. That's really resonated with me still, like as a painter and as anything that I do. I think before you turned on the recording, we were talking, and I mentioned something to the degree that I feel like I'm always learning but can never be taught traditionally. I think it comes from a lot of how I came up as a vagabond produce tramp.
Yeah, I guess the only thing different is what you're bringing with you.
Right. Yeah, which is.
So could you tell us a little bit about your music?
Yeah. My music it's like a cut and paste hodgepodge of the history of rock and roll, like when I say rock, it's less music and more of just like artistry that uses sound, that uses a formula. Like, I mean, rock and roll, as I've always understood it, is just freedom. It just means freedom. It just means being uninhibited and kind of being like within like a shamanic state or an animalistic state. And the music that I play, no matter how it comes out, is that's the aim, right? The aim is to kind of like encapsulate within 3 minutes or 4 minutes of a song, just like absolute sheer freedom. And as I perform it, and hopefully, to the best of my ability, translating that to an audience, so we all share this kind of like temporary autonomous zone.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's simple. It's all simple, 3 chords and the truth, 3 chords and 3 chords and the mysteries. It's I like to make songs that like a 6-year-old child could kind of like get into the groove of, and then from there I like to try and, through lyrics and through vocalization, I like to kind of like imprint other aspects of the human condition on top of it. But the song structures themselves, I like to keep just like very rudimentary, because it's like a spell, right? Songs are spells, and it's just something that you want to have repeat within your head and to get stuck in there. But
so what you were saying brings me to 2 questions or 2 ideas. The first is, I'm curious how you employ vocalization towards these ends. And it also occurs to me that I tend to do sometimes the opposite of what you're describing, but also for magical purposes, where I will kind of embed a compositional idea that has symbolic intent and layer it over itself or with other things in so many ways that it's difficult to follow, almost like subliminally encoding something.
Yeah.
So there are multiple extremes for how you can do that, and it's exciting to see all of it. But how do you use vocalization?
Just intuitively and spontaneously. It's just I really, my favorite thing about music is performing for an audience, and I feel very connected to, even if it's like 7 people in the room, sometimes more so when it's less, because you can kind of get the frequencies more direct. But I feel really affected and influenced by the living bodies that inhabit a room when I play, and it changes the way that I sing. It depends on like what another being's kind of like energy level is, and I happen to I don't know, I do have this like coyote trickster element about me that likes to like stir things up if it feels too placid and just like too kind of like reserved in a room, because I'm always I'm seeking that sheer expression of joy, which is like laughter, which is like orgasmic, and I think that the music performances that I do, that's the aim, right? The aim is to kind of like transcend modernity, to transcend kind of like this monotonous reality that we all must inhabit. The vocalization is really just like it's this sheer spontaneity, it's this sheer intuition. It's just kind of like following wherever it will go, and sometimes it's really. I mean, I don't think I had control over my voice for a long time, but recently I feel like I'm getting more and more of it. It surprises me. I mean, something overtakes me, to tell you the truth. It's not me, and that's why I love doing it. Yeah.
Is it the same thing that overtakes you each time? Are you like consciously invoking something, or is it just whatever comes through?
That's a great question. I think it's, I think it's a multi-headed being that's all attached to the same heart source. It's different and the same. Yeah.
I see. Kind of like multiple masks on the same being.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
All right.
I mean, it's all,
right.
I do feel, that it's all one thing. Everywhere you look, you're seeing the same thing. It's like the basic hermetic principle, right? And I love that, but sometimes it makes it difficult to participate in the games that are set up for us to participate in.
What do you mean by the games?
Pretending that it's all the same thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
The veil of Maya or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That we're all separate.
Yeah. Yeah, that. Yeah.
Okay. So when you're putting together a new song, what comes first?
Songs for me, they always kind of like are born from this bubbling internal place of rediscovering my self-respect. It's like when these existential kind of blankets of like, what am I doing here with my life, seem to kind of come over. That's like the beginning of a song being bubbled up and being like, you're here to give us birth, We are your wild, dark-eyed children. We are your songs. Here's another one. Bring me out into manifestation. Bring me out into the world. Yeah, so it starts with the sense of rediscovering this kind of this knowing, this internal knowing of purpose, and then from there, it's kind of like carving out a sculpture in the marble, but the sculpture already exists within the marble. It's just our job to chisel it out. I mean, the way that I write, I'm always writing things down in a notebook, just like I think a lot of us do this, just like street graffiti, things that I hear people on the street say, fortune cookie lines, I Ching throws, like other scraps of like literature and poetry that I appreciate, that I quote, and then in the classic kind of cut up method, when a song comes up, all of this stuff gets like torn up and put into the proverbial blender and comes out into a way that it actually feels like I'm able to believe it when I sing it, and sing it as I believe it. And usually from there, like at that point, it just starts to write itself.
I gotcha. So just to, I guess, paraphrase for understanding or comprehension, you kind of start with this bubbling laughter sensation, and like whatever it is starts coming through, and then it sounds like that manifests a little bit in picking up little bits of words that become the lyrics, and then the rest of the music comes from there.
Yeah. I mean,
I was just going to say that a lot of the time I'm the opposite. Like I tend to start with either a musical theme, or like I know what time signatures I want to mess around with. and then I often don't worry about the lyrics until near the end.
Well, I love that. It's perfect that we're speaking with one another then, because we're opposites and we can learn. We can learn the way that the whole
Yeah.
mechanism operates. Yeah, yeah, I've always kind of approached pretty much, I don't know, my mother used to say that I did everything backwards, and I used to get really, I was like, what do you mean by that? It never made sense to me. But the more that I live in this life, the more that I kind of see, and the more I engage with other beings, I'm kind of like, oh, I get it. I do kind of do everything in this reverse way that seems standard. I don't know. That's neither here nor there, but I'm just trying to make sense of, right now I'm trying to make sense of my process, because I've been living this way a long time, and for like 20 years, I've been just kind of doing these, like, this do it yourself on the outskirts, kind of in the shadows, type of performances and living, which has been beautiful. It's allowed me a lot of freedom, but it's also it also hasn't really granted me very much material comforts, right? And that's fine, but I'm something is transitioning in me internally that I just like, I'm going through a sort of ego death currently, honestly, and I don't really know what's going to be born next, but definitely I think if I'm scattered in my speech, it's because I'm kind of there's a part of me that's going away, and a new part of me that's being born, and that's what your listeners are getting.
Oh, that's good. And as long as you guide that process wisely, it's good that you're doing that.
I appreciate. Yes, I mean, I'm giving it all I have to guide it wisely, but I do have, I mean, my inner sense for self-sabotage does rear its ugly head day to day, and I have to kind of, the games where you hit the gopher on the head with the mallet. It's like I have to do that with my sense of self-sabotage.
Well, at least you're aware, right?
Right.
Some people aren't. Right. Just what you're saying makes me think about aging. I was never quite as geographically dispersed as you were, but I had a period where I kind of lived, you could say, on the edge. That probably sounds more exciting than it was, but I was not living safely, and I was doing a lot of weird things like parkour while on psychedelics in abandoned buildings, and it was fun. But at some point you get older, and when I say older, I don't necessarily mean wiser. I mean that your joints get older, and you just gotta, if you're gonna live long enough, you gotta have enough material comfort to keep living.
Definitely, yeah. There's like the deep sense of listening to the body, which, yeah. I mean, the body will tell you exactly what to do if you sit in silence long enough and listen to it, and and I mean, like, the body's main function is survival, right? Like, that's what it's here to do. It's like your meat suitcase is here to protect you and keep the game going long enough so that the spirit or soul or whatever we want to call it can learn the lessons that it needs to learn within this particular incarnation.
Yeah, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your spiritual practice or beliefs.
Sure. I mean, I feel kind of like a spiritual anarchist, like, again, if it's all one thing, I think everything is there to kind of just like, it's all road signs to one's own internal state of being, to learn the lessons that I think only the individual knows, It's I very much feel that we are alone together within this lifetime. Like, I mean, nobody knows the internal landscape of another being, no matter how close they get to them. Yet that is the beauty and the invitation and the glory of intercommunication. Is like, oh my God, you too, me too. You feel that too, I feel that too, but you never really get it. So my spiritual beliefs are pretty simple, you know. It's essentially like love everybody and always tell the truth. Is that a Ram Dass? I think that's a Ram Dass. But I mean, that's not easy to do. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in order to get there, you know. I'm not a dogmatist, by it just doesn't work for me. But I think that all of the texts and all of the everything that's been written, there's value in everything, you know. There's value in everything, and it's just like, intuition, I guess. Intuition. That is my spiritual belief. Is to really hone, develop, and listen to intuition, and that will guide us to whatever needs to be learned.
That makes sense. Yeah. Do you practice paratheater? I listened to your podcast with Antero Alley.
Okay, so that was yes and not really. I made up my own version in a way. Antero is an amazing cat, and I bought his books, and we've had a correspondence for 5 or 6 years. He reached out to me saying that he was a fan of my music, and I was like, wow, I felt very flattered. And I bought his books on paratheater, and I was really fascinated with how I interpret it just through the books. You know, I don't think I ever even watched a YouTube video of a performance at that point. And I was like, oh, I love these ideas. And I was like, I can do something like this. So I had the audacity where I took the term and I kind of made up my own version for it was like a healing modality for the imagination that I was doing during the pandemic. In 2020, I was kind of like, I felt like I was riding this high manic egoic state. And I got really interested in paratheater, as well as like Alejandro Jodorowsky's psychomagic methods. And I kind of cut and paste and patched together my own type of system, I guess, that I wanted to experiment with. So I put it on offer online for people to do. And what I did, I would have people do 2 free writes that would determine, 1, you know, the purities of their soul, and 2, the impurities of their soul. And based on those, I would write these kind of theatrical, dance-based, movement-based little, performances that we would do together. And then after that, I would have them cut up the 2 free writes and rearrange the purities words and the impurities words so that they can name what they felt the purities of their soul were and the impurities of their soul were. And from there, they could, you could bind it. You could bind the impurities, and you could do some kind of way to embody the purities into more conscious awareness. So yes, I kind of practiced paratheater, but I also kind of made it up as I went along and used the word, which is similar to what Antero did from, what's the fellow who created the paratheater? Yes.
Grotowski? Yeah. Grotowski is probably more known for listeners for his poor theater. He experimented a lot with like extremely low budget, no prop, no costume plays that are kind of like avant-garde experimental stuff. And then what we're talking about now, paratheater, sort of evolved with that. Did Antero work with Grotowski? I feel like he did.
I think so. I'm not certain, but I think there was a brief interlap there where they, I think maybe for a session or 2. Yeah.
I gotcha.
But yeah,
Cool.
that whole system and Antero, that's his life's work, and it's really profound when you get into it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like what I was doing was just, I'll be honest, I just kind of like took some scraps of what I learned, and I was like, oh, I can do something with this, with my understanding of like performance and rock and roll. And I just fucking loved the way that sounded, paratheater. Like, what a beautiful sounding word. And I just I hijacked it. I did. I hijacked the word, and that's what I did.
That's fine. It's adjacent to theater, right?
Absolutely.
It's paratheater.
Yeah, totally. And it's all theater, the grand theater of society, you know. It's like this whole kind of this whole scenario we find ourselves in is theatrics. I mean,
Yes, sure is. My relationship with paratheater is interesting because so around late 2019, early 2020 is when I encountered
oh
Buto,
yes, beautiful.
and I got really into that. Were you going to say something?
I'm just excited to hear you talk about this.
I got really into it and quickly realized its occult implications. And it wasn't until maybe 2022, probably early 2022, that I encountered paratheater at all. And when I read Intero's books on it, I realized that there was a lot of overlap between how I had sort of reinterpreted Buto and what he was doing.
Yes. Yeah, the similarities in all these systems, right? Like if you go into any kind of magical system looking for what makes it similar, like you could start to unlock it pretty quickly, you know? And then there's a lot of additional type of information and really interesting stuff that oftentimes is just kind of comes from the probably just like the personality of the person that's writing it, which is necessary too. But it seems to me like a lot of like when you just find the things that are similar, you could kind of like patchwork a pretty cohesive method of like how to be a human being in this world. And that's what I love about all of these different systems and techniques, you know?
So that's what word do you use to describe these kinds of things? Do you call it a cult?
I did for a long time. I liked the word. I don't know anymore. I think I'm in the process. I'll get back to you on that one. Okay. It'll come to me and I'll let you know.
Okay. I'll conditionally use the word occult, understanding that it probably has the wrong cultural
hidden,
connotations.
right? I mean, that's all that word means. And yes, these things they are hidden. Like, I mean, hidden in plain sight, right? It's not. Yeah. So occult works. It's following that voice of inner knowing, you know. I recorded 5 songs with my band in New Orleans. My band is called The Decision. And I called the EP and the main track is Voice of the Fire. And to me, it's that. It's like, I don't know. Have you ever had the experience where you're just like staring into a campfire, like on a clear night, and you just like stare for seemingly hours, and then there's like an internal knowing. To me, there's an internal knowing that kind of like is dictated by the light, by the flame, and that the voice of the fire is really just that kind of like intuitive path, like following this without compromise, following this real hidden this occulted voice that lives within you, and once you know it and trust it, then you got it, and you have to follow that until you have to listen very deeply and with gratitude, kind of like go with that. The voice of the fire. Let's just call it that for now.
That's good. I like that. So is this the general purpose of the occult for you? Is it like trying to be the best human that you can be? Or earlier you talked about learning lessons for your current incarnation. Is that what the purpose of these activities is for you?
Yeah, I mean, I got super interested in again, it's just the musicality of the language, you know. The term, like when I first heard chaos magic together, just the beauty of the way that those consonants dance with those vowels, and just like the chaos magic is such a musical, and like it invoked a feeling in me that I was just like, what is this, and I bought this little. So this was like 10 years ago. I was living in Portland, Oregon. I was a taxi cab driver, and I was living in this residential hotel. It was a really great chapter of my life. I felt like I was like a character out of a Charles Bukowski novel or something like that, or a Tom Waits song maybe is just as accurate. But I was driving taxi, living in a hotel, and I bought this little zine on Chaos Magic at this anarchist bookstore, and there was a suggestion in the zine to just like declare. Oh, maybe yes. No, the suggestion was in the zine, but it's also the same thing that's in Grant Morrison's Pop Magic about just declaring yourself a magician. But in the zine, it recommended like going out into nature, and I happened to live close to a park, and putting your bare feet in the earth and just like gazing at the moon and declaring yourself a magician. And I was like, oh, that sounds fucking lovely. And so I went and I did that. Um, I went to the park that was near the hotel that I lived at in Portland. What's the name of that park? It doesn't matter. I can't remember the name. But I went and I did that. And then the next day I woke up and I had an email that was inviting me to be interviewed for the local music paper. And I was like, holy shit. I was like, there's something to this. I love this. And then when I went for the interview, I took the bus to the interview a few days later, and it was one of the most kind of like bizarre magical experiences I've ever encountered, because time just seemed to like freeze, and it felt like I was just operating in this reality that was totally outside of the typical understanding of time and space. Like I decided to leave my phone. I knew when I needed to be at the interview, and I knew my timeline, and I was like, okay, I don't want any distractions, so I'm going to leave my phone here. So I walked out my door, and the first thing that I saw across the street was this car that was the same exact like model as a really dear poet friend of mine who had died a few months prior. And I was like, whoa. And I just got hit with this kind of like emotional nostalgia of this person. And I felt like all of the influence of their work was kind of like coursing through my veins. And then the bus came like right then, and I got on the bus, and then there was a crow that was like flying. Like I was looking out the window of the bus, and there was a crow that was kind of like eye level with me for what seemed to be the whole damn trip to the interview. And that was really bizarre. And then dig this, man, this one's a trip. So I got there early, and I went to have a falafel sandwich at this Lebanese food place. And there was candles on each of the tables. And I remember sitting there, I ordered my sandwich, and I remember being like, this candle is awfully close to my napkin. I better move my napkin so that it doesn't catch on fire. And I did. And as soon as I moved the napkin, the table, like two tables in front of me, their napkin caught on fire. And then they had to throw it outside. And then I saw another kind of like murder of crows. And I was just kind of flabbergasted. I was like, okay, like 4 days ago, I declared myself a magician, and now this is the things I'm noticing. And I was a little just like, okay. But that was, maybe beginner's luck. That was like, I mean, that was something that maybe indicated to me that like a life path of I don't know, that the consensus reality that we're all spoon fed is definitely not the only thing going on. And that was a real lovely kind of like introduction to this type of consciousness and awareness. But that was just kind of like, that was just a taste of the beautiful things. Like it's gotten, since doing that, there's really no turning back once you do something like that, and you have to make sense of your life. And it's been a lot more difficult than it was before I ever actually got interested in any of these matters. It's been a hell of a lot more difficult, actually, because like, I guess I just realized a lot more like my own responsibility. Like responsibility, you know, like we're all responsible for our own lives. And like, I think that has been for me the lesson that I continually need to learn, that I am responsible for my own life and no one's coming to save me or any of us.
Yeah, one of the things I think is interesting about chaos magic in particular, but I guess it happens somewhat whenever anyone changes their religious or metaphysical beliefs. But with chaos magic, you really get a heightened sense of responsibility for your own beliefs. Whereas, like, if you were like raised in whatever religion, let's say you're raised Christian, you kind of just believe it. You're not you haven't consciously chosen. You might consciously decide to continue being Christian, but it's not like you're accepting responsibility for the impacts that being Christian has on the way you experience the world. It's that you have faith. Or if you're an atheist, right? If you're like a hardline atheist, not even a pinch of agnosticism, you kind of just are like, this is what's real. You're not accepting responsibility that maybe if you chose to believe something else, that your life would change.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Definitely. Yeah, speaking of Christianity, I have been getting a lot of encouragement from Jesus as an archetype, you know? I feel like I love me some Jesus right now.
In what way does that play out for you?
Well, kind of like a queer witch, you know, a queer witch that went up against everything, like you know, hung out with the lepers and the whores. And I feel like this is exactly the type of people that I feel are keeping me going currently, you know, people that just have like no that are just totally unlocked from the typical value system that we see in like the capitalist West, you know, like what I see is just the hypnosis of, I don't know. Well, it's just survival, you know, we all have to survive. But as once again, as somebody who's lived pretty much my entire adult life without really having a traditional job, or nothing about my life has really been kind of like the way that it's been set up to look for success, or, you know. And so figures of just like complete compassion and love for just like the human condition, like these are the things that kind of like bring me comfort, because like sometimes I get discouraged and I'm like, okay, maybe I'll go get a real job or something, and I look around and I'm like, there's not much I don't have any skills. There's not much I could get hired for. So figures like Jesus Christ kind of like bring me back to kind of like remind me that I'm okay where I am, and that I must continue the path forward. That being said, like it has nothing to do with like Christians or whatever. Just as a figure that, you know, the whole message was love each other and do unto others as you'd want them to do unto you. Like that seems like a perfect kind of spiritual framework, right? Like,
yeah, and ditch all of your money and throw out all your weapons.
Yeah, which right? Like, well, I don't know. Yeah, the weapons. I think art is the best weapon in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I don't think Jesus the figure is anti-art. I was meaning more in terms of like, he who lives by the sword dies by the sword, and telling Peter not to defend him from being killed, getting angry at Peter for chopping off the Roman guard's ear.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Throw out all your money. That ain't hard when you ain't got it.
Yeah, I'm sure that helps with him starting his I guess people would have called it a cult, right? Like cults were common in Rome, so like it wasn't like insulting. It's just like the million different Roman cults, right?
Totally. Yeah, I think it's definitely a cult. I mean, it's all a damn cult, don't you think?
Yeah, pretty much. Those same mental dynamics apply in all sorts of ways.
It's like, yeah, I mean, the culture at large is, you know, I mean, political systems are a cult. Definitely religious systems are a cult. Definitely like musical subcultures, a cult. Like it's all. It seems like, but so small like actual cults or whatever. Like people that kind of like people that decide to move onto like a shared land and just like throw away old identities and stop paying taxes and follow a guru. Like I think the only difference is like the amount of people involved in those as to some of the larger cults that are going on all the time.
There are varying amounts of
Yeah.
abuse, or maybe varying kinds, or
Heard that.
like yeah. All right. Do you have any inspiration sources you'd like to talk about?
Yeah. I mean, lots of things, really. Well, I mean, definitely since we mentioned earlier, I like Entre Ollie's work in life and the way that he's navigated his uncompromising artistic kind of output. Well's kind of like, yeah, his work has been huge for me over the last few years. So I want to do a shout out to that human, especially since they've been at the end of life stages here. The spirit of the freedom and the spirit of rock and roll has been kind of my main guiding impulse throughout my whole life, because it overtakes me. It's like it's like from another life or something like that. It's just that the absolute freedom that comes with being with being possessed by music when it happens. It's like music is a shamanic thing. It's meant to kind of like stop time, go into another world, bring the listener and the audience member there, and share with them something that they didn't know about life before. And then once the song or that particular piece of music is over, you come back. So that's kind of a vague and strange answer, but that has been my inspiration and always is. Like two nights ago, I had an astrological consultation with a friend of mine who plays in like a punk rock covers band, and he invited me to come. They had a gig at this saloon in Portland, and they invited me to sing with them, and I did. And holy moly, that was just like medicine that was just deep medicine. It just reminded me of that feeling. I became like possessed. I became possessed, or maybe it was a voluntary possession. It's like in voodoo rituals or anything like that. Just overtaken with the spirit, and the spirit is nameless and probably and multifaceted and a many masked creature that's all comes from the same heart source, like we said earlier. But that, I'll just call it rock and roll. The spirit of rock and roll poet. That's how I identify.
I like it. All right. Do you have any different creative things you do that we haven't talked about yet?
I want to make a collection of poems that I've written throughout my life as like a there's something about books, right? Like there's a real power and charge in books. And I've been collecting scraps of writing and trying to kind of like organize them and coordinate them so that there could be a tangible book for, basically it'll be small press, but for loved ones that I've encountered personally, that's kind of like as a little totemic reminder. So yeah, writing a poetry book is my next kind of obsession.
How do you approach poetry? Like, I guess you're going to use the cut up method mostly?
I mean, usually it's just kind of like, I do a free association writing and just kind of like dribble a page or two with whatever comes out. And then I look at it sometime later. And if there's anything that kind of like seems like it would be, if there's anything that jumps out at me as like a beginning line, I'll take that. And then the thing that I love about poetry is just kind of like, it's like word music, and also just how it looks, kind of like like a tiny little architectural thing on a page, like how it's lined out. So like the dance between those two worlds. Anyhow, if there's anything in the free write that seems to kind of like pass the gate guards of my own criticism, I'll start kind of making something from there. And then it's the same as with anything, once you get into, once you recognize that you're in the creative process, then the invitation is to kind of like find your way out with grace. It's like a maze, you just have to keep kind of or a hall of mirrors. You just have to keep turning the right corners until you get out. And then once you're out of it, you have this artifact.
That makes sense. So you talked about your gates of criticism. Yeah. When you're reading these free association texts and you find a line, what kinds of criteria are you judging it by?
If it hits me, and like if I feel it in the gut, if I'm just like, if I'm not if my whole body is not kind of like vibrating with cringe, and if something kind of like warms in the belly and it's like it feels good, it's all feeling. I think life is all feeling based. We're animals that happen to have the capacity to intellectualize things, in my opinion.
I got that. Yeah, a lot of the musicians that I interview, I kind of have to question them differently, because musicians, unless they're like a classical musician or like a composer or something, they tend to be feeling first people, whereas the writers, they tend to be much more wordy.
Yeah, as the nature of their craft. Words are wonderful, aren't they? They're so beautiful. They're so seductive and alluring, words, when used well.
Yeah, it's interesting how powerful words can be, while at the same time obscuring what they point
absolutely towards. But this is the thing that I love about poetics and love about like language in general, or surrealism. It's like if the intentionality behind the words is there, you can kind of sometimes say stuff that doesn't really even necessarily translate linearly, and the message will come across somehow. There's a I was just going to say there's a difference between that and like word salad. I think it's like you could kind of like say something with intention, and it can kind of come out. I don't know. I think if the intention is there, it translates to some degree.
Yeah, I think that's part of the power of poetry, is that there are many kinds of poetry, but one of the ways you can use poetry is to, like you were saying, kind of dance around your intention rather than pointing to it directly, and that kind of avoids people mistaking the word for the thing itself, depending on what exactly you're doing.
Yeah, well said. That one right there.
So how do you feel it's different, or maybe is it different writing poetry that is intended to be sung like while you're playing music?
Yeah, for me it is, just because you have to cut off a lot of the fat, I think, in order. I love melody. I really like it. Like I was saying earlier, I love kind of like simple melodies that can be, that kind of gets, that get stuck in the head, that become like a repetitious kind of obsession for a time. And with that, sometimes you have to like cut out certain phrases and certain words that you really would want to be in there, but just so that kind of fits more comfortably within the melody. You want it to be smooth and fluid, and you don't want anything to fight each other. And I think with on the printed page, you could kind of like make it a lot more jagged, a lot more kind of like a lot more steps and a lot more cliffs down, and a lot more, I don't know, you can do like, I just really like the way that like hard consonants dance with like soft vowels. And so like you can make it like a scat, or like a long, it's all about the way that like it kind of like moves in the mouth, and the sound of it, and the rhythm of it, and the frequency of the piece as a whole, to me. And so I think that you can get just a lot more well, you could just have a lot more fun experimenting with sounds and ideas on the page. Maybe not all the time, but for me, I'm trying to write pop songs right now. You know, I've done all types of music throughout my whole vocation of playing music. I mean, I've really loved doing kind of like industrial experimentation and soundscapes and stuff like that. But I'm currently really obsessed with writing what I'm referring to as pop songs, which I think that for people that listen to, I don't know, Taylor Swift or anything, what do they hear when they would hear my stuff? They probably would not think that it was a pop song. But in my estimation, what I'm doing currently is writing pop songs, and that just means somebody will hear it once and it will be remembered. It'll be repeating. It'll be kind of like going through their psyche, their consciousness for a while, and make them want to come back to it.
That makes sense. Yeah, you're using like the tighter compositional song structure rather than going off all over the place or having too many different things going on that makes it harder for it to stick.
Yeah. And I'm actually like I'm trying to write stuff right now that would just like any normie would hear it and be like, "Oh, what is that?" You know. And it's an experiment of mine. I want to see. I mean, I do want my music to reach as many people as possible. So I think it all starts with the product. You know, the quality of the tunes have to be there. That's the beginning. That's the beginning stage.
For sure.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I don't have any more questions, but I always run off the rails in these conversations, but I really enjoy them. I always leave podcasts feeling really giddy.
Yeah, it's been good. Well, do you have anything you'd like to plug?
Yeah, I mean, I love my YouTube channel. I really enjoy making videos. And I've made quite a few of them. And so, yeah, my YouTube channel, I think it's Voodoo It Yourself is the name of the channel. I think if you just write Dusty Santamaria, it should come up. That, and also just everything, all the music that I've made is all on Spotify and every other streaming platform. If anybody has listened this far into the conversation and wants to hear the songs themselves, it would be my honor if you gave it a spin.
Well, it's been great having you on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking me.